This past month or so, I haven't really been able to shake the feeling that I'm missing something. That I was supposed to finish something. I was supposed to upload something that I've been putting off because I've been lazy and I just. Oh. Oh. Right. We've already examined how the fall of Berlin fails to accurately depict the Second World War. Now let's examine how it fails on a cinematic level. The biggest problem with the fall of Berlin is that it has no discernible story or plot. This is the case with most of Mikheil Chiaureli's films, and at the very least they also had characters that you somewhat liked. Fall of Berlin, all the characters are creepy, cheesy, or just terrifying, in my opinion. Mikheil Chiaureli's objective for this movie seemed to have been to create a visual record for certain key events of the Second World War and turn them into propaganda tools for Stalin. But in doing so, he sacrifices narrative and story structure. They go right down the toilet. Now it can be argued that plot devices in a conventional way for some of these types of films doesn't really work because it holds back the actual film. And you would be right in many cases. But The Fall of Berlin wasn't directed by David Lynch or Stanley Kubrick. It was directed by Mikheil Chiaureli, and he's not exactly the greatest storyteller even by 1950s standards. He should be directing a 50s version of Grown Ups, not Second World War epics. The trouble with this movie, and many other Soviet films for that matter, is that the director confuses drama with story. Every once in a while, something really dramatic will happen, like our main character being given the Order of the Red Banner and invited to meet Stalin, or his love interest being kidnapped by the Germans, or where they liberate a concentration camp and the main character is unable to find his girlfriend. But these overly dramatic, dull scenes don't really progress the plot at all. At the beginning of the war, our main character is a devout, fiercely patriotic soldier, and by the end, he's a devout, fiercely patriotic soldier. No change, no growth. But at least our main character at least has a personality, unlike many of the other characters in this film. Stalin! Now I understand that the historical Stalin was a very quiet man that kept to himself due to how much he feared everybody around him, so I can somewhat forgive them for that part, but at least give him a personality. I don't doubt the actor's ability, because he's appeared in many films as many characters, especially as Stalin, but even appearing as Stalin in some other films, he goes into so much depth and is an amazing actor. I place the blame of his dull performance in this movie solely on the script and the director. I'm sure Chiaureli would have been willing and ready to accept that he's not exactly an actor's director.
И вообще всех людей стало втрое лучше и дороже. С тех пор, как я полюбила тебя.
I'm so sorry, Maria Malkona. But what can you do with a line like that? I understand the 1950s were a time of respect and pleasure, especially with young women in the Soviet Union. But, Jesus Christ, it's like this movie was written by Tommy Wiseau. But that's not to say that Mikheil Chiaureli is completely stupid. As we can see from part 1, he is a very effective propaganda maker. He also understood that with the recent victory in the war, and the establishment of the Iron Curtain, going quite well for the Soviets actually, he understood that he needed to cash in on this new opportunity for propaganda. I mean, you could have taken every German character out of this film and barely noticed their absence in terms of the plot. I say if you want to make a movie about the Soviet perspective of the Second World War, make a movie about the Soviet perspective of the Second World War. If you want to make a dull, flaccid propaganda film, just don't. If you want to watch a war film, the primary goal of a war film should be to portray war accurately, or at the very least its effects on the people involved. But The Fall of Berlin does neither. The battle scenes suck. They really do. We get no sense of any of the tactics. You get no sense of bloody what year it even is half the time. In the edition on YouTube, there are, at least from what I counted, about 4 battles. The battle for Moscow, the battle for Stalingrad, the battle for Kiev, and the battle for Berlin. And in 3 of the 4 of these, we don't get a sense of any tactics. All we see in the first battle is our main character yelling "Charge, they will not reach Moscow," and then whipping back the fascist invaders in very stereotypical fashion. Pretty much the only battle we get any sense of the tactics used is the Battle of Berlin, which is how they stormed the Reichstag, with the storm divisions and small units advancing rather than driving tanks through there. Which is how it went, so I'll give them credit for that. Credit where credit's due. But aside from the lack of tactics shown, the battle scenes themselves are just very boring. All we see is some artillery fire, some blank machine guns, some smoke, some really crappy hand-to-hand combat, and a few mid-20s to middle-age former soldiers or actors facing off in the middle of rubble in a city that has a quite significant name around this time period. Stalingrad, it seems. You know, the site of the bloodiest battle ever fought in human history, the place where the deadliest hand-to-hand combat fighting since the Industrial Revolution took place, where more than 2 million people on both sides were killed. That battle? Oh wow, look at that carnage. Oh my god. Oh no, he's fainted. A grenade went off in front of him and he's fainted. He'll have a headache when he wakes up. Oh, they seem to have forgotten how to shoot their rifles. Oh no, oh, the tank's going near them. Oh god, this is so horrifying. The officer's pistol and gets doinked in the back of the head. Oh god, horrifying. You see what I mean? So aside from all the pro-Stalin propaganda, the biggest crime that the fall of Berlin commits against historical authenticity is its G-rated, bloodless battle scenes. In my mind, you can't accurately portray the Second World War, particularly the Eastern Front, without showing lakes and rivers of blood. This is a first-hand account from the Battle of Stalingrad by German private Helmut Volz, as he discovered on the streets of Stalingrad fighting the Soviets. One of them, the Russians, came out and had his head covered in blood. Blood was coming from his mouth, his nose, from his ears. He pulled his machine gun, the Russian machine gun with the drum in front. He pulls it into the air, and I say to myself, well, you ain't gonna get me. And I aim my gun at him, and all of a sudden I see little stars. I was shot and that was it. I saw little stars coming from in front of my eyes. I looked to my right, and I ran my left hand across my face, and a jet of blood was coming out, and my teeth flew out of my jaw. It was 10:30 in the morning, a Saturday morning. Now it was all over, I thought. And my colleague saw it, and he went, "Ah!" and crushed the Russian who had shot me. So he bandaged me, and all of a sudden he yelled, "Careful, Russian," and aims his machine gun at him. And then his steel helmet flies through the air. He got shot in the head, and the leather strap underneath was blown off and flew through the air. And I looked at him and saw how he was shot in the head and how the head split. That was the first time I saw a brain. On the left-hand side and on the right-hand side there were parts of brain, and in the middle there was water. Not blood, but water. He looked at me. He was standing on the soil of his wounds, and at the slope of the crater, and so he fell there. Oh no, not the guy passing out! If you don't show the violence as it really was, it gives the impression that the Second World War on the Eastern Front was more like a camping trip rather than an actual war. In fact, this movie gives the impression that this war doesn't even seem so terrible. In fact, it seems kind of fun. And confusing, my god. As I mentioned earlier, we get no sense of any of the tactics. None at all. Who bloody cares whether or not you are fighting back the fascists? Who are you? Where are you? How important is this battle? Come on, tell us, we need details. Does Chiaureli really expect everybody watching this movie to know the ins and outs of every single battle on the Eastern Front? Well, yes actually. And, speaking of which... As I mentioned in part 1, this film is meant to be Soviet propaganda, but more specifically, Stalinist propaganda. Regardless of that propaganda point, this film still misses the main plot of every film, even a propaganda one. And that's to keep people hooked and interested. Who bloody cares if Stalin is with the soldiers all the time, which he rarely was? What most people find interesting about the Second World War is the incredible stories of the people involved, their courage, their resilience, and all too human flaws. The uniforms, the awards, are so painstakingly accurate, down to the most minute detail. However, the plot is the most inaccurate Second World War movie ever made. It's about as accurate as your average camping trip in Grown Ups.
You pansies!